Hello again, everybody. Today's lesson, we're going to continue to focus on decimals, but we're going to look at them when they have whole numbers or they're mixed numbers. So you can see that we have more than one grid, and today when we make our, grab my pen, make our names out to write our decimals, we are going to be using the wholes or the ones. So now I have another task. It's not too hard, but I do have to count the grids that are entirely shaded in. So in this case, I only have one shaded in, so that stands for one whole. Now you remember in the last lesson, we had stated that columns, there are 10 columns that go across. We count the columns, and that tells us the tenths. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 columns shaded in, 6 columns out of 10. And then I have 1, 2, 3, 4 hundredths. So my mixed number is going to be 1 whole and 64 shaded out of 100. The number name, this time I'm going to break it up a little bit. We're going to name the wholes first, and that reads as 1. Then we're going to write what the decimal says. Its word is and. Then we're going to pronounce the decimal amount, 64. And the last place names the decimal, and the last place is the hundredths place. All right, so 1 and 64 hundredths, 1 and 64 hundredths. All right, so going to our next one, I'm going to race you, and I know I'll beat you, but go ahead and write out your places in the names. Go. Don't cry if you lose. It'll be okay. Done. Oh, that's ugly ass though, but I am done. All right. So again, we start with the wholes, and we have 1 shaded in. Oops, that was kind of crazy. And then over here, it is shaded kind of wonky, but I did want to give you one that was a little different looking, just because there's no rule that says you have to do all your tenths first and your hundredths. You can shade technically any way you want. It's just a lot easier to count if it's organized. So this time I just have to be careful that I count columns. So I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns, or 5 tenths, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 squares, or 7 hundredths. All right, I think writing the mixed number is going to be really easy for you. You just write your 1, 57 shaded spaces out of the 100. That's the part. And then our number name. Start with your wholes. 1. Focus on what the decimal point says. And this word announces that a part is to come. And here's that part. 57. And then the last place names it. Okay, not too bad, right? So now we're going to look when the wholes increase to more than just 1. So again, I'm going to race you. Write your decimal names or place names. Go. Haha. I kind of got a shortcut there. I've had some friends in the past, I didn't come up with this, they did. But instead of writing the name with all, letters, they did a 10 and then the THS and 100 and the THS. So that's a little bit of a shortcut for you. As long as you still remember that's tenths and hundreds, that's fantastic. All right, so when we look, now I have 1, 2 grids that are shaded all together, 2 holes. And then over here, I'm missing one of these blocks. If you need to draw pictures to help you, that's always, you know, a helpful tool. But our tenths are our 10 columns out of 10 total, and our hundredths are our 10 little squares out of 100 total. So I don't have any tenths this time. I'm going to have to hold it with a placeholder. And then my hundredths, I have 3. So when we write our mixed number, 2, but this is just 3. You don't pronounce that placeholder. And it's out of 100. For our number name, the holes go first. Then the decimal point. It says and like before, it still just reads 3. And the last place names the decimal. Like so. All right. So this one I'm going to kind of let you race and try on your own. I'm going to go ahead and put my decimal places with their labels. And I think visually you could probably see well enough to know what this is, but if not, no worries, I'll definitely explain it. But 1, 2, 3, go. All right, I'm going to start to fill mine in. And remember, if I ever go too fast and you're not done writing, you can always pause, finish, and then press play again. All right, so I have 1, 2, 3 grids that are all shaded. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 columns. And I can actually have two answers for this one. I could choose to call that 90 squares out of 100, but my mixed number and my number name would have to match. So my mixed number would be 3 for the whole, 90 squares shaded in out of 100, or 90 hundredths. I would read it as 3. The decimal says and. It reads 90. And the last place is the hundredths place. That's one way you can answer it. But placeholders coming after the last place of worth, you don't actually need that. Technically, you could call it 3 9/10, 9 columns out of 10 shaded. But then your mixed number should reflect that. 3 and 9 columns shaded out of 10. And then your number name would be 3 and 9/10. Sorry, it's a little sloppy. If you intermingle them, it doesn't make sense. This first answer, we can think of this as counting pennies, and you wouldn't call pennies dimes. And over here, we're counting dimes, and you wouldn't call dimes pennies. So really, they're worth the same, but when you choose your version, you want to make sure you're consistent all the way through your name, your decimal, and your mixed number. All right, Now this one's shaded really weird, but like I said, I just don't want you to get stuck in one mindset. So I'm going to go ahead and answer. If you want to pause and answer yourself and compare, you're welcome to. But I am going to go kind of slow, so you'll probably be ahead of me. All right, so I saw 2 fully shaded grids, so 2 ones. There were no columns, so no tenths. I needed a placeholder. And there were 3 hundredths, 1, 2, 3. So my decimal is 2 and 3 hundredths. My number name 2 and 3 hundredths, and my mixed number 2 and 3 shaded out of 100. All right. Now there are some other tasks. It's not always based on just looking at grids, but for this task, I'm going to write each mixed number as a decimal. So it would help if when you practice this, you start with your names. Now when I look, my whole number is a 12. I know that the 2 goes in the ones place, and that's going to make the 1 be in the tens place. But what's most important is I know this goes on the left side of the decimal because this is where the whole numbers are. Now this fraction, though, is going to have to make me think. The denominator are tenths, so I have to put it in the tenths place. That means there are no hundredths this time. When you use this, whether you write it up here and use it as a guide or you write it for every number that you convert, it's forcing you to really kind of follow directions. The denominator says tenths, so the 1's forced to go into the tenths place. All right, here again, I know 31's my whole number. But my denominator's telling me where it goes. The 7 goes in that tenths place, which means the hundredths is not needed in this case. Now, if you put a 0 in the hundredths, it would still capture the value, but you'd be talking about pennies when the mixed number is technically talking about dimes. So you want to be consistent with what they're telling you to do. All right? So now I'm going to do 12 and 9 hundredths. I'm just going to go ahead and write 12 before the decimal. And my denominator says hundredths, so I have to put my 9 there. Now you probably know what I'm going to say. We need a placeholder. So by using the denominator name and the place name, it'll always tell you where it goes. Go ahead and write this as a decimal, and I'll be a few seconds behind you. All right, did you get the same decimal? I hope so. This task below says to write the number name and mixed number for each decimal. So for this, I think I'm going to write the number name first. I know that's the 10th place. So I'm going to read the whole number first, 10. The decimal says and. 4 is how the decimal reads. And the tenths is the last place in the number, and it names the decimals. Okay. Here, again, I'll start with the whole. Actually, whoop, back up. I'm so sorry. We have to write our mixed number. I almost forgot my own directions. All right, so 10 and 4/10. 10 and 4/10. All right. So next one, I see 17 for the whole number. The decimal says and. That reads 43. And this is hundredths place. So the name is hundredths. So my mixed number is pretty easy to write. 17 and 43 hundredths. Right, I'm going to let you do the next two on your own. If you want to pause the video and do your work and then play again, you can go right ahead. Or if you want to complete the work with me, it is up to you. All right, so here I have 8.02. Well, I'm going to start with a whole. And the decimal point. That reads as 2. And this is in the hundredths place. So I write that 8 and 2 out of 100. For the next one, the wholes read 53. The decimal says and. The decimal amount reads as 82. And the last place, tenths, hundredths. And that just leaves my mixed number, 53 and 82 hundredths. The last thing that the practice and assessment work will have you do is to choose from multiple choice. And, we are converting from mixed to decimal or decimal to number name and so forth. The first one focuses on which decimal correctly represents the decimal form of 8 and 9/10. So if doing this helps you keep everything straight, keep doing it. There are 8 ones and there are 9/10. There aren't any hundredths. So I need to look for an exact match. These are going to look really like, they're going to play games, I guess, on your eyes. They're going to look a lot alike. When you are online doing your assessment, I definitely encourage you to use the eliminator choice to get rid of the silly things first, so your eyes aren't focused on so many digits. For example, B is ridiculous. Look at all of those places. We're just going to cross that one out. And then I know that I have 8 ones. So C has a 0 in the ones place. That doesn't make any sense either. Now I'm down to 2 that look pretty good. And the mistake is one that kids commonly pick. But if you match your work up, this 9 is in the tenths place. But this 9 is in the hundredths place. So D matches your work. All right, same task. Which decimal correctly represents the decimal form of 7 and 3/10? Let's write out our grid. So again, if I use my eliminator choice, I look at D and it's just 73. It's not even a decimal point. Then if I look at B, again, they left the wholes with nothing. So now I'm down to deciding again between A and C. And again, 3 is in the tens place, which makes A correct. For C, it was in the hundredths, and that's not the right spot. All right? Here's an example when we ask you to find the number name for a decimal. Instead of reading all of those, I would write my number name first and then match my work. So the wholes, say 81. The decimal says and. The decimal reads as 32. And I know this is the tenths, and that's the hundredths. So the last place is the hundredths place, and it names the decimal. Now I might suggest starting with 81. So when I look at A, it's got 81, so I'm going to leave it a choice. But B says 8,000. I'm going to eliminate it. C says 81, and D says 81. Now I'm going to look for the word and. When I look at A, I see 81. Whoops, there's no word and there. I have to have that word for it to be a decimal. When I look at C and D, they're still checking out. Now I need to see 32. The last thing I focus on is the decimal name, and you can see distinctly they're different. This is incorrect. It should be hundredths, and so that makes C correct. All right, in our last example, which decimal correctly represents the decimal form of 22 and 7/100ths? Well, I'm going to write 22, and I see it says hundredths. So all it has is 7/100ths. It doesn't have any tenths, so I need to make sure I have a placeholder. Now, if I didn't, it would read 22 and 7/10, or 7 dimes. This is 22 and 7/100ths, or 7 pennies. Very different. So that one's a goodbye. Here, again, I would eliminate it. And then I'm down to C and D, and probably you could pick it out pretty quickly. But by using the eliminator choice, when you have to discern between many examples which one is correct, it does help a great deal if you eliminate everything that isn't it and narrow it down to find what is the correct answer. All right, until next time, thank you very much. Good luck on your practice work and your assessment.